Hey everybody, this is Ty from Building Spirit, Soul, and Body. The subject I'm going to be talking about today is a subject that is not something that's easy because I just completely despise this being, and that's about the subject of Satan himself, Lucifer. They call him the god of this age, the prince of the power of the air. And who is this being? What are his origins? What is his purpose? And what is his fate?
And this shows each individual part in sequence. Starting with part 1, we're going to go with where it says, who was he? Part 2, his turn. Part 3, his plan. Part 4, war on man. Part 5, his name. Part 6, his attack. Part 7, what do we do? Part 8, God is in control. Part 9, why God uses him. And part 10, his fate. Okay, so I pulled up BibleHub.com again. I'm going to start with Ezekiel 28. So Ezekiel, or generally speaking, when you look at the Bible, sometimes there's parallels to beings like I'm going to talk about Satan, that also this verse speaks about a king of Tyre. But I'm going to show you how this verse is broken down and how this is Satan that I'm speaking about. So I'm going to talk about his origins, starting with verse 11. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning the king of Tyre, and say to him, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you, carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald, topaz, onyx, jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were anointed as a guardian cherub. Okay, a cherub is an angel. For so I adorned you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways. From the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade you were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mount of God, and I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to earth. So I'll also speak about some other verses about how Satan, there was a battle of Satan and the other angels, and how he was thrown to earth. And so I made a spectacle of you before kings. By your many sins and dishonest trade, you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So here shows a parallel with the king of Tyre. It's almost like it's a parallel, and it also transitions. So I made a fire come out from you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who are watching. All the nations who knew you were appalled at you. You have come to a horrible end, and you will be no more.
It is believed at one point in time that he had a third of God's angels that he was an authority over. He was a worshiper of God.
Okay, so I'm going to go to this next verse I'm going to go to is in Daniel 10. I'm going to start with, I'm going to go up a verse here. I'm going to show you Satan's rank and how that he was a prince. And so I'm going to start with verse 10 here. A hand touched me. So this is an angel has reached out to Daniel for a prayer that he needed an answer for, and an angel has come as this answer. So right now, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I'm about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Then he continued, do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and humble yourself before your God, your words were heard. So he prayed, and look at your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. So most believe that Gabriel is the one that's speaking to Daniel. And so this this prince of the Persian kingdom must be some sort of a higher ranking demonic force that resisted Gabriel. Then Michael, one of the chief princesses, right? So here's another rank. So we have Michael, it's a chief prince. We have the Persian kingdom, or this prince of the Persian kingdom. So it shows you that these are high ranking angels, this from the demonic realm, this from God's heavenly realm. So it says, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come. Okay, so I'm going to show 4 verses on his turn, on Satan's turn here. So I'm going to start with Isaiah 14. I'm going to start with verse 12 here. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth. You who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. So I'm going to show you this word stars here means angels. So he's going to try and elevate himself above the angels, the other angels of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. So he knew that he could not be above him, so he wanted to be like him. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. Those who see you stare at you, they ponder your fate. And so this also transitions just like the other verse I showed you in Ezekiel or Daniel. So it starts to parallel between Satan, and then it parallels to the man because it has a universal meaning. So the next verse I'm going to show you, I'm going to start with this. Like I said, the Revelation 1:19. If you look at the red letters, those are always Jesus speaking. So the verse starts with, "Write therefore what you have seen and what is now and what will take place later. The mystery of the 7 stars." So I'm going to show you what the meaning of the stars are from what I said earlier. That you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the 7 angels. So if we go back and we look at the word, how Satan wanted to raise and elevate himself above the stars, that's what it means. Angels. Right there. So the next verse I'm going to go to is this is going to show the war in heaven. So it's so right here, Revelation 12:4. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. So for whatever reason or how this happened, Satan convinced a third of the angels to follow him. Now the speculation from what I heard from a phenomenal teacher named Derek Prince is that he was a very high ranking, like an archangel, and he had those who that he would be the one giving the orders to on God's behalf. And so he must have told them, that maybe God has a better plan, or I can give you a better plan than God, and maybe told them lies, and they believed it. And so when they believed the lies of Satan after dwelling in God's sanctuary, dwelling in God's home, the judgment was finalized, and there was no more hope for them. They were swung to the earth. So right here shows the war. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Right? We look right here. He leads the whole world astray, and I'll speak about that a little bit later, about his names and his titles and how he runs a lot of the mainstream media. He's a deceptive liar. So verse 10, then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, and I'm going to read this slower, but I'm going to read it quicker because I'm going to go over this verse once again. But I'm going to read it slow this time. Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They do not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore, rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. And finally, I'm going to go to Luke 10:18. I'm going to click on the New International Version, go down to verse 18. The letters in red is Jesus. He says, he replied, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I've given you authority to trample on the snakes and scorpions and overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven.
Satan's plan was to gain authority. When he was casted down to the earth, he had power. He even had a power of the third of the former angels, but he had no authority. So I'm going to Genesis 3:1 to show where he gained both power and authority, and he took it from man. So Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, which is the devil, we may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. You will certainly not die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some of it and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. This is where they handed the authority over to Satan, is when they disobeyed God. And so he had gained, that's why we see this massive amount of power and evil and wickedness through the earth, because they handed it over to him. Now, the next verse I'm going to go to is in Hebrews 2:14. So I'm going to the NIV version. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power, that is the devil, and free from those who all their lives were held in slavery by fear and death. And this is what it brought. When they disobeyed, they brought fear and death, handed the power over to the devil, and that's why we are in the position we're in. His plan, again, was to gain authority and bring death to mankind.
His war is with mankind. He's absolutely furious that man can now dwell in a place that he can no longer live.
So then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, now have come the salvation, the power, and the kingdom of God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of his brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. They have triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the sea, earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows his time is short.
His names are telling of his new nature, which are the following.
This first verse I'm going to is in 2 Corinthians 4:4. Click on it here. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers, so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. The second one here is in Zechariah 3:1. Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right side to accuse him. So as you can see, he's an accuser. He blinds. This next verse here is in 1 Chronicles 21:1. Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. And you have to remember, David knew the Lord for quite some time, for many years, and yet you can see that he incites violence, right? And you can see the other versions side by side. He stood up against Israel. Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. So a direct violation of the Lord's command. Mark 1:13. And this is Jesus. So this is one of the Gospels. And he, which is Jesus, was in the wilderness for 40 days, being tempted by Satan. So he's a tempter. He was with the wild animals, and angels attended him. John 8:44. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth. There is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and a father of lies. Another title of this beast. So Ephesians, I'm going to start with 1 at the top here. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of the world. And the ruler, here's another title, ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. So ruler of the kingdom of the air. We look at the media, the social media, the news outlets. He rules a lot of this, the mainstream liberal media that we see, and he can push his message on the screen and push it to whether it's believers or unbelievers, because he rules the air. All right, and I'm going back to Genesis 3:1 as the final verse. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? So he's crafty. So you can see that he's the God of this age. He's an accuser. He incites violence. He tempts. He's a father of lies. He's a murderer. He's a prince of the power of the air. He's crafty. He's a master at language. These are all titles, and explains that who he is, what his nature is now.
His attack.
I'm going with 2 Timothy 2:26 at the bottom here. And that they will come to their senses and escape from the trap of the devil, who has taken them captive to do his will. And like I said, the world essentially is held captive and trapped by him. He has blinded them, as I explained in the other verses. And he holds people to do his will by disobeying God. Ephesians 4:27, which talks about giving the devil a foothold. It says, do not give any opportunity to the devil. Giving him a foothold. If it's an unchecked sin, he can get a foothold. It can be your thoughts. It could be what you watch. It could be allowing something in your home. He attacks. So be alert and sober of mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. As I stated, he's a murderer. He's a liar. He wants to devour people and have people kill themselves. We see these suicides and these suicide bombers. He's prowling on. He's roaring. And you know what? If you open up the door, he's going to devour you, and that's what his nature is. And Samuel 16:14. Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. So he's a tormentor. He attacks by tormenting. If you look at, people nowadays, they have high anxiety, depression. All these things that people need medications for. These are the different areas that he can attack, and he can only attack if there's open doors. And we have to understand where they come from, where they're at. So this next one here is in Luke 13:10. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. Right? We see a lot of people with these debilitating diseases and people that are crippled. Like it says it's a spirit, that had bound this individual for that many years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." So it's a spirit of infirmity. Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. And this final verse is in Luke 22:3. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12. I believe that Satan focuses on the higher level, those in spiritual authority. It could be government leaders. But if you open up the door to him, he can come in. And Judas did that. Judas was a thief. He was a liar. And, he had seen what Jesus did for 3 years of ministry. And because he had continually hardened his heart, Satan came in. And what happened to Judas? He ended up committing suicide. He had a worldly remorse, not a godly repentance, which is the difference between him and Peter. Peter rejected Jesus, but later on had repented, had a godly remorse. Judas had a worldly remorse, had Satan enter him, and he committed suicide.
What do we do?
Ephesians 6. Verse 10, finally be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand firm then, with a belt of truth buckled around your waist, with a breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet, with your readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And we have to wear this armor. This is our protection. What else do we do? James 4:7 is it says, "Submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." And what else does it say? It says in the other versions, humble yourselves and subject yourselves to God. That's where it starts from. We need to look at ourselves. We need to submit to ourselves. We need to humble ourselves unto God. And then essentially, if we resist the devil, what does it say?
that he will flee from us. And it corresponds with this verse right here, and this final verse in Luke 10:20. It says, however, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And now that Jesus has come to the earth and he broke the power of death, he has given us authority to speak against these spirits, to lay our hands on those who are sick, those who have infirmity. And like I said, they must be subject to us.
God is still in control.
Job 3:1, verse 6 here. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered, from roaming the earth, going back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? So this is a dialogue with Job and Satan. But as you can see, that even as horrible as this being is, he still has to give an account. God is still in control.
Why God uses him.
God uses him as a form of discipline. I'm going to Hebrews 12. I'm starting with verse 4 right here. And you can just read along this with me. And you're struggling in sin. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you completely forgotten his word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as a son. Endure hardship as discipline. Right? We see all these different hardships. It could be medical, it could be financial. I mean, it's the Lord can use anything at his disposal. Right? God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who had disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? They discipline us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So he uses Satan, the devil, to bring discipline on his people, to humble the nations. When we see nations being wiped out in the Old Testament, a lot of times what God does nowadays is no different than what he has done in the past. It's reminiscent to how he works, how he operates. We see how he also humbles people because he wants to save them. We see these countless trials that doesn't matter if you're a believer or unbeliever. He humbles them because he loves them. He knows that eternity is around the corner, and he will do what it takes to save people. But if you get to a point where your heart is so hardened, what then? If I discipline my child, he could submit to me, but he can get to the point where he just completely disobeys my discipline. But I do it because I love him. How much more does our Father in heaven love us? And this is why he disciplines us as children, and even the world, and even nations. And also because he's a God of justice.
His eternal fate.
Revelation 20, it speaks about Satan's ultimate judgment. Now, if you want to read through a lot of Revelation, or even starting at the very top in Revelation 20, it speaks about what happens and what his fate is during or right after the times of tribulation. He'll be thrown into hell right here for 1,000 years. So Jesus will and the Father will reign on the earth for 1,000 years, but then Satan will be released. Now, if you look right here, when the 1,000 years are over, so this explains his final fate and how we will never ever have to deal with him after the 1,000 years. And evil, wickedness, everything about the demons and these fallen angels are done with forever, and all evil. So Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and to gather them for battle. In number, they are like the sand on the seashore. They march across the breadth of the earth and surround the camp of the God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them, and the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. And at the very end right here, it speaks about anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. So this shows his fate and the fate of the damned. And like I said, this will be the end and the finality of this beast and the deception that happens, through the time of mankind up until this point.
Recap: that Satan is absolutely furious that mankind can take his place, that he can no longer live, that he can no longer dwell. So his attack is also on mankind. He tries to bring a foothold on people's lives. He lies to them. He's a murderer. He prowls around like a roaring lion, and he torments. And what do? We put on the armor of God, or the helmet of salvation, breastplate of righteousness, belt of truth. We stand firm in this battle with our feet fitted for the gospel of peace. We put on the shield of faith that works to extinguish all the enemy's arrows. We put on the sword, the Spirit. We clothe ourselves with humility. We put on the garments of praise. These are our weapons against them. We also have the angels that protect us. And through all this, God is still in control. God uses him to discipline his people. God uses him to discipline the nations that have turned away from him and those who don't know him. And he also uses him to turn the unbelievers so they can bow a knee and they can accept Jesus in their heart and be welcomed into heaven. And his fate will be in hell. His fate will essentially be in the lake of fire. And he will not be able to escape it, along with those who are condemned. All right, and so that recaps the subject about Satan, about Lucifer, this beast, whose final eternal existence will be in the lake of fire, and we will no longer have to deal with this being anymore. And this is Ty from Building Spirit, Soul, and Body. If you could, please like it, comment. If you have any suggestions on any future titles, let me know. So I appreciate it, and God bless, and this is Ty out.